Hello and welcome to the 905er podcast and happy new year and welcome everybody back. We're now into our fifth year of doing these things unbelievably.
Yeah,
um, I mean, we're not at 5 years yet, but we started in 2020 and now it's 2025. So count that how you will. But Joel, you kick off. We've had some changes in just our, who we're doing this thing with, who's
yeah,
helping us get it publicized and so on. So, uh, update our listeners on what's going on there.
yeah. Just a bit of housekeeping into the new year, and happy New Year to all of our listeners and supporters. Thank you very much for sticking with us all these years. Um, Last year, we decided to end our relationship with Crier Media, uh, and have since parted ways, which is pretty much the direct way of saying this. Um, it was just a thing that we said time to part. We signed on with them to help us boost our audience and to broaden our reach. And we kind of did as much of that as we could with them. And we are deciding to take this to a new level. We've parted ways with them. We've signed on with another podcast network, Sound Off Podcasts, with Matt Kundle, who we had on before when we were talking about Bill C-18 with him about the repercussions of that. Put a link in the show notes for you to listen to that if you have the inkling to. But yeah, just a bit of housekeeping. We are still planning to produce the same content that we've always done, the same way that we've always done, talking about the same things that we've always talked about. Just a bit of transparency for you, our listeners, so that we're you can't say that we're keeping anything from you. Is just the short, neat way of saying it. But that's that. So yeah,
Great,
so
yeah, good stuff. And I mean, yeah, like you say, nothing's going to change in terms of what we do in particular. So we're going to do a 9 to 5 out roundup today. Obviously, we've just come through the holidays, but a lot going on still. But well, we thought we'd start off with one story that's kind of a positive story, which makes a change, and for the new year, woohoo! Uh, and that was that reported in the Star today, just a few hours ago, that rents are actually dropping across the GTA significantly. And wow, I mean, it's like basically the supply of rental properties has increased to such a degree that supply and demand is doing its thing, and rents are decreasing, not increasing. And wow, that's good news for renters, that's for sure. And it's kind of good news for landlords too, in that it shows that building rental property is a desirable thing.
yeah, I mean it's fantastic. Like I'm looking at the article here on my phone as we're chatting, so I'm kind of playing multitasker. But I mean we're seeing rents dropping right across the 905, Burlington, Mississauga, Milton, Oakville, even in Oshawa, I believe is quoted in this article. And we're not just talking like a couple $100. We're talking like 5.8%, 2.3% drops, 6.8%. For two-bedroom apartments, three-bedroom apartments declined 7.9%, which is fantastic news for renters in the region. And as we're talking before we hit record, um, it was one of those things that when we first started talking about the housing crisis on this podcast way back in the day before anyone else did. We had on Mike Moffat, who was explaining that it's a supply and demand issue. We don't have enough supply to meet the demand. We also had on Jennifer Keesmaat, who was saying that what was needed to encourage rental builds was things like the elimination of the GST on new rental builds, which the federal liberals did implement, and we're starting to see the benefits. I mean, these things don't happen overnight. It takes a while for it to filter down through the system, but this is a sign that what the federal liberals intended to do on this does seem to be working. Um, it you
Yeah.
know are now are they going to tote that to their own benefit? Who knows? But this is I really can't see anything but good news for this for the 905.
Yeah, as listeners, long-term listeners to this podcast may know, I mean, I was renting for a while in Hamilton. When I moved in, the rent was 1,800 a month. When I moved out, it was advertised for 2,300 a month. That's a $500 increase. However, when I drove past there the other day, I'm not sure that my old apartment has got anybody living in it. Which again suggests that the demand is people. The renters have the power to say, "Well, I'm not moving there. I'll go somewhere else, which is a bit cheaper." And that, I mean, that's kind of how it's meant to work. And I mean, ironically, as a lifelong sort of pinko liberal lefty type, um, the market does work, and it actually works better than things like rent control to control rent increases. I mean, this is renters actually getting a decrease on their rent.
Here's how backwards times we live in. You consider yourself a pinko commie leftist liberal when you're saying, "Hey, I want a free market competition to help give renters a little bit of power in terms of getting the best bang for their buck." Who'd have thunk? Who'd have thunk that?
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think that's ironically, like I think most people, even if you're a lifelong NDP or whatever, we live in a capitalist society, whether we like it or not. And if you regulate things properly, and if you arrange things properly, and if the government puts the right incentives in place and all those other things, then it can work, and it can work to the benefit of everybody involved. The trouble is, too often that's not the way it actually shakes down, and so you end up with slumlords, or you end up with sky high rents because there's a massive shortage of demand. And basically, since the 70s, Ontario hasn't really been building rental properties, but now there's actually a market where people are going, oh, maybe I'll get into renting stuff out because I can, because of the demand, and I'm not having to pay GST anymore or PST because the province
my
has
profit
matched
margins
it.
are that much greater now.
Yeah.
The other thing, I was told that this is an indicator to me that the federal liberal loosening of the purse strings, I guess you might want to call it, is working. The other side that you wonder how this could really benefit is if the Ontario provincial PC party said, you know what, let's allow that middle density, right? Those fourplexes to be built as of right in our communities. How many? Because I was at your apartment, and that was pretty much like a middle density. I think it was a 6-story rental unit, very nice apartment. But if we allow more of those to be built in our cities, how much more inventory is going to go on the market? How much, how many more families can find a nice, affordable place to live to start off? And yeah, bring down those rental prices even more. It's just it's one of these things. Like the housing market is not one thing. It's not the Fed's one thing. It is a multi-level. All 3 levels have to come together, as we've discussed many times on this podcast. It's good to see one level's initiative is working out. I think we could do better if the other provincial level got into the game seriously and kind of said, okay, let's kind of take off the brakes a bit on this and let the car ride, and let's really build this thing up. Will they do it? Who knows? I think you and I both think they need to start really mucking with the building codes and the as of right permissions in the province to really allow the market to build what it wants, not just what is cheapest for developers to build. This year, we think there's going to be an election, probably provincially. Everything in my head says yes. Will this be an issue? I hope it will be. I hope the provincial parties will seriously talk this over and see this as a key thing to throw into the housing stew to help bring down rental prices as well as just home ownership levels.
Yeah, I think what does reducing rental rates suggest about how how the property is being built. It's just that it's nothing to do with building on the green belt and urban sprawl. It's to do with high density living. It's to do with people buying condos and as an investment and then renting them out. And it's to do with purpose built rental properties, which have apparently are at nearly record levels, because first time in so long, there seems to be a reason to build rental properties. It's nothing to do with all the things that the province has been focusing on, of just like letting people have their white picket fences out on a former piece of farmland. And it's everything to do with the best kind of development that we want to encourage, about density and housing for the lower, mid and lower incomes, rather than building houses for the wealthiest. So it's a good thing, and I dare say that if the role that the federal government's played, and I'm certainly not saying that this is all down to them, they probably won't get the credit they deserve. I don't think anything right now is going to give them. Nothing's going to save them right now. But nevertheless, it's a good thing, and I think it's nice to start off the year with a positive story, and a kind of unexpectedly positive story, if I'm completely honest. So good things can still happen, apparently. Hey.
Well, I give credit where credit's due, but as we said, there's a lot more to go, and I really do think that this is an example of where if the province kind of stepped in and did its share of change, allowing that middle density to thrive, these numbers could drop even further and make a real competitive renters market for those low income and middle income families or people to find those places to get a foothold. This comes off a bit of a sidebar. We've all seen the homeless encampments popping up in our cities. This is a good news to help. Is it going to clear the homeless encampments? No, but it does give me hope that if we can keep this coming down, some of those people we can find into affordable rental accommodations, get them off the street into safe, secure housing. Again, if the province just gets off the bench into the game and really owns this should be a call for any provincial party. I would say, again, if we're heading into an election year, which it looks like it, this should be a rallying cry of just like let's put our foot on the throttle, foot on the gas, and let's build, baby, because it seems it's working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So good story. Not much more to say about it, which is what happens with good stories is you run out of things to say. But yeah, just glad to start off the year with something positive. Another article from the start today, actually, that is kind of again, getting away from the sort of frontline hellscape of national politics and international politics, and looking at some trends in education in Ontario and particularly in our regions across the 905, and basically picking out some trends that are likely to become more prominent during the course of the year. One of the big ones with education is basically what's now perceived as the problem of teacher sick days, and what is mentioned in the article is that teachers are basically the number of sick days that are taken when a teacher is presumably sick and needs to take a day off have skyrocketed over recent years, really over the course of about a decade, but accelerating and becoming more and more the case. So there is discussion. Certainly, some of the school boards have gone as far as to sort of hire private investigators to go after teachers and to see if they're faking. And of course, like in any profession, there are people who for want of a better phrase, take the piss. But I thought it would be worthwhile sort of diving a bit into the background of why um, suddenly teachers are taking so many more sick days, and it really goes back, I feel, to or a lot of teachers feel, back to both the actions of the current Doug Ford government and also back to the McGuinty days, when you remember there was sort of industrial action between the teachers and the McGuinty government shortly before he left office, where uh, basically there used to be a system where teachers were rewarded for not taking sick days. In essence, they had so many sick days, I think like 20, 21, something like that. But if they didn't use them, then when they retired, they were given what was called a gratuity, an actual payment, like, congratulations, you didn't use your sick days, here's some extra money for your retirement. So there's basically an encouragement to go to school and teach. And the McKinsey government abolished that because it was like, these teachers are earning too much or whatever. End result is, well, now there's no encouragement not to use your sick days, so people are going to use a few extra ones. And then under the Ford era, those sick days have been cut from the 20 odd that they did have down to I think 11 now. And so you've lost that motivation. You've got fewer sick days, and teachers, I suspect some are thinking, well, screw it. If you're going to do this, I'm going to take every damn sick day I can, and screw you guys. So it's the law of unintended or perhaps intended consequences, because the cost of this new system that was meant to save money is an extra $250 million or so a year by the province to support teacher sick days. So it's like, you stupid idiots, you had a system that worked, you thought you'd nickel and dime the teachers, and as a result, you're paying more money. And it's such a classic case of government short-sightedness, and treating staff badly is actually a dumb way to go.
There's a lot of levels to this story,
Yeah.
and a lot of ways that we could approach it. I always look at my thoughts are, if you have sick days, use them how you use them. I really don't care if you want to use up, first day of school, first day on the job, you want to use up all your 10 sick days or 11 sick days in the first week. Okay, but that's it. Like, you're the adult, you squander them, and you don't have any more sick days for the rest of the year. That, like, there's a bit of, they're adults. They can police themselves and determine when they don't want to take a sick day. And if that might be a day that they just say, you know what, I need a day for myself. So be it. I really don't like the idea of, oh, we need to get a letter from the doctors to prove that you have this illness. No, that's only, I think, if you need like a long-term leave, right? You have like a real illness that you, like cancer or something of that seriousness, that you need to take time off. That's when you get the letter and the all that. But the idea of like, no, I'm a little frustrated with my work, or I'm just feeling under the weather. Take the day off, go rest up, get better, get back in there the next day. Treat
Yeah.
treat your employees as adults is basically what I'm trying to get to here. Um, I have owned businesses where I've had employees call in sick, and it's left me in the lurch. I'm struggling to find people to come in and fill shifts, and it's a pain in the ass for the manager or for the owner of a business. I get it. It's not nice, but at the end of the day, um, it's the like it's the right, like, we don't work in a slave economy where you're expected, like, you show up to work whenever your boss demands it. Which brings me to kind of the second point that we discussed when we were talking about this before we hit record was, if you have a teacher who's constantly calling in sick, yes, there are going to be those teachers who are not serious about it and who are abusing the system. Deal with those. I think those are more one-offs than endemic. But if you're seeing a school where you're constantly getting teachers calling in sick or taking time off, and it's always trying to find supply to fill a void in a school spontaneously. At one point, does the board say, "What's going on at this school? What are the working conditions that we just have constant absenteeism at this school, because I, for one, don't believe teachers don't want to work. I think they do want to work. It's a rewarding job for many teachers, and the ones who abuse it are the minority. So
It's a rewarding job in ideal circumstances.
yes,
That's the thing. But as we were discussing with Karen Brown a few weeks ago, um, you know, despite all the so-called gold-plated pensions and working conditions and the time off in, and I'm just repeating all the cliches here. So if you're a teacher, don't necessarily take this as me speaking literally. But despite all that stuff, many teachers just feel absolutely that they're working in impossible situations where they are at risk from children, where they are expected to be glorified childminders, mental health experts. They have no training in mental health,
special
and
needs.
and
Yeah.
much more. And then when students when students abuse them, as is to an extent, that's always been the case. There's always been bad students. There's always been students who are rude. There's always been students who do all kinds of things. But when that happens, they don't even get the support of their administrators or from the school board, but are in fact undermined and questioned and doubted. And I think the end result is like an unhappy workforce who are like, screw this. What else can I do? Can I take early retirement? Can I go get? And so we're struggling to find people to fill the roles, or struggling to find people to do what is actually it can be quite a lucrative position, which is to be a supply teacher after you've retired or something like that. And I'm like, no, screw it, I'm done with this business. I don't want to subject myself to more abuse. So yeah, I mean, it's a symptom of what seems to me to be a system in crisis, or something on the very verge of crisis in many cases and in many schools.
What gets me though is the extreme that the boards are going to hire PIs, private investigators, to track down. I mean, private investigators are not cheap, and if this is serious enough that you have to hire it because you think it's so widespread amongst your board staff. I mean, this isn't. We're not talking one school. We're talking an entire, in this case, the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board. You have to sit there and wonder, is that a good use of tax dollars? I mean, you're going to pay a PI to go and investigate somebody, and you have to wait to catch them in evidence that they aren't actually sick, or they're not sick with what they've described. In which case, okay, what are you going to do then? You're going to fire them? No, the union will grieve them and fight. I mean, it's this long, protracted out battle. What, just to get rid of one teacher? And it will cost us how many thousands of dollars in PI fees, lawyer fees, union battles, just for one teacher that, okay, and they're going to keep teaching the whole time. And even if you do win, you get rid of them. Okay, great. Now we got to go find somebody to replace them. Well, as we had a discussion with Karen Brown again a few weeks ago, the teachers aren't wanting to jump into the profession. We're facing a real threat of losing good, valuable teachers to other jurisdictions in Canada. That the Ford government has turned the teaching profession into what was once a highly sought after career choice into a bit of a, just, I don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
I just don't understand the logic of this. Rather than, okay, let's look into what's needed to keep a teacher in the school.
Well, because that would require the school boards to make requests of the province that the province is just going to ignore, right? So it comes back constantly to blame the teachers, blame the teachers, blame the teachers, and I what I hear through the grapevine is very much this feeling that, like, okay, we're the professionals, we're the frontline workers here, and we are treated pretty badly. We are our judgment is questioned, our judgment is not trusted. We're facing abuse, which can be physical, it can be racism, it can be any manner of other sort of types of abuse coming from students, that is not,
Yeah.
the teacher's word isn't even, there are
And
circumstances where you can't just take a teacher's word as gospel. I get that. But there are many circumstances. I mean, the default position surely has to be that the responsible adult in the room is the person you trust. And that if a child with a long history of being a bit of a troublemaker, it's like you don't need to have a 10-day investigation to find out what happened. The child misbehaved. Now we punish them. But of course, you
right.
can't punish children anymore. Now, don't get me started about this, but I think we're living in a kind of crazy world where uh, basic discipline is seen as
Well,
negative. And
then
I think
you,
that's crazy.
then you run the risk of parents getting involved with, how dare you discipline my little Johnny or my little Sally, and that
Well,
the question is like who
yeah, that is
how do
certainly
you get
true.
a public education system that works, that educates all children in it to the best of our ability, that equips them for real life? But at what point do we just let the abuse, like where is the actual abuse happening? I also bring it back to the issue of sick days. What other profession? I mean, I want to. I'm asking our listeners here. I know a number of our listeners. Every now and again, you might call in sick to work because you're just like, you know what? I don't want to go into work today. I'm taking a mental health day. I'm taking a me day, or you know what? I am checking out early today because I'm going to get a head start on the traffic up to cottage country or to go on vacation or whatever have you. And I generally wonder, like, what would you feel about your boss, your employer, hiring a private investigator to follow up on you? Like, we're dealing with adults here. Like, if this is such a widespread issue of they think that this abuse is happening on a systemic level or that widespread that we need to hire private investigators and it would be cost effective to the taxpayer to do so. What's going on in our schools, right? Like, there's something going on that's driving teachers who have long careers in education that they are presumably trusted adults to look to educate our children. Also, now we don't because what I do think there's a bit of a double standard here, and allowing, if teachers have 11 sick days a year, give them the sick days, let them police it themselves. If they abuse it, they abuse it. Too bad. But if you know what, if anything above that, ask for a note. And if that's a chronic illness, we deal with it that way. But what point do we just start treating each other as adults? You know,
Well, yeah. I mean, sick days thing is always a bit peculiar to me, having grown up in Europe, and having been self-employed since I've been in Canada. Um, that my recollection of working in Europe, in fairly junior positions at some point, was that if you're sick, you take the day off, and if you're not sick, you go to work, and there was no kind of limit on. I mean, I guess if you were long-term illness, and certainly, like, if you're off more than 5 days, I think you had to get a doctor's note or something. But basically, if you were sick, you took the day off, and you didn't
well,
count up sick days. You just, well, I'm sick, I'm not coming
that's what I never understood is if you're sick, you're
in. Yeah.
sick. Like, why do we have this? You're only allowed to get sick,
For
11
11
days,
days a year.
11 days a
I,
year.
yeah, I don't understand it. And just coming back to the 11 days a year. So my understanding is, and any teachers listening can correct me if I've got this completely wrong. My understanding is that teachers currently get 11 sick days a year. And but the averages that are quoted in this article for the number of sick days taken by the average teacher are way over 11 days a year. So it's like, well, so that means that you've got a bunch of teachers who are on short-term and long-term disability, and that's what's giving you these above numbers that are kind of unachievable by the average teacher who's just, like you say, taking a personal day kind of thing. So it's like, okay, so why have you got so many teachers who are on short-term and long-term disability? Well, I can imagine all kinds of reasons for that. It's because they're depressed, hacked off, cheesed off, and can't face going into a classroom anymore. And that's a problem that needs to be solved, not by going after teachers with PIs, but by, addressing the systemic problems that exist in Ontario classrooms.
Well, exactly that. Like that, and that's a general problem. I think a broader problem in the workforce is this expectation that if you're going to work, well, I get to treat you as well poorly in some cases. Like we've all been in a situation where an employer demands, oh, you can't take a day off work. You have to come in because I can't find anyone. And it's, yeah, that might suck. Um, but I don't know. I find I it's a misplacement of priorities. The idea of like I'm going to force you to work because it makes because the boss wants you to, and there's a question. We have sick days for a reason. I don't know.
And again, coming back, there used to
Yeah.
be a carrot approach, and now we've moved to a stick approach. And the carrot approach worked better. Basically providing a motive to teachers to take as few sick days as possible worked, and they took as few sick days as possible, and then they retired with a little bit more money. You got rid of that, and now you're paying the price, and it's just classic short-sightedness, classic stupidity, frankly. But it also speaks to the other major issues that exist in seems to me anyway, that exist in Ontario classrooms. Pretty much, well, I don't know about it at every school, but there's certainly at many schools.
Well, yeah, I mean, rather than look at how do we improve the actual education system and the state of our schools, and there's a variety of different options to look at that. Increase funding to our schools. We've talked with the merging of the Catholic and public systems into one publicly funded system would be one way, potentially. There's a variety which we can't cover, but all of them cost a bit of money up front, and it means an actual examination of how our schools work. And quite frankly, our current Ontario PC government they hate teachers. They're not they've been antagonistic against teachers since day one. If people remember back before COVID, teachers in Ontario were on strike. They had rotating strikes to protest the government's lack of sincerity, I guess, in negotiating a new contract with them. That only came to an end because of COVID. It was the pandemic that stopped that strike action. Like this government is antagonistic, and I understand maybe you're pro or anti-union listening to this podcast, but at some point we have to say, at what point does this behavior just hurt our children? Because if teachers are unhappy, they're not pleased with being in the school. They're not given the resources that they need to succeed. And if they don't succeed, our children don't succeed. The repercussions are going to be felt for generations.
And it's not just about getting back at teachers and the fact that they have a competent union or competent unions. It's about cutting funding and not believing in public education, and massively cutting funding to public education to the extent that per child, they're down by, I can't remember the figures, but I mean, I believe most Halton schools, per child, they're down by $1,000 a child or something like that. Now, don't quote me on that. I read a number recently, and it was a very big number. I can't remember quite how big it was. But in real dollar terms, your child has less money being spent on them today than they had a few years ago, in a very significant way. And so, of course, things are getting worse as a result. I mean, they've kind of, there's no such thing as a textbook anymore. And this is justified. Oh, we shouldn't be teaching from textbooks anyway. But it's like, yeah, but for a certain ground level of education, textbooks can be very useful. No one should be just reciting from textbooks, but the textbooks should be available as a teaching tool. No, they're all gone because we don't want to. How convenient, you don't have to spend money on books anymore. Terrific. and you could go on and on and on about stuff, but above all else, it seems to me the the basic lack of commitment to maintaining decent behavior in classrooms, but the basic sort of view that children can get away with stuff that adults would be never be able to tolerate it, in terms of, like, no, I understand children are children, they're immature, but again, that's why you have a teacher, that's why you have a trusted
Well,
adult in the room.
that's where we learned, hey, I can't go and be abusive to you,
Yeah,
Roland,
yeah.
because I had a teacher who, when I stepped out of line, not that I did, I was an angel my entire time in school, but the kid that stepped out of line, that kid was put back in line right some fast, and we all learned a lesson. Oh, that's not how you get ahead in life. The
and
goal.
and failing to implement those basic standards of behavior is to let down the misbehaving child just as much as anybody else, because
Right.
they're an opportunity to improve their behavior, make them a more give them a decent future where they understand how they're meant to behave, is lost. And it also means that you're disrupting education for all the other children in the class, and wasting their time and wasting the teacher's time on ridiculous battles with children that can be
Well,
solved very easily with a little backbone.
there's
Um,
that, but instead we're empowering our school boards to use our tax dollars to go on witch hunts for teachers who need a day off. Not, I don't want to say day off. That's the wrong. Like, teachers who might be
uh,
saying, you know what, I just need a day to kind of recoup myself and set myself right. And if we're saying nope, that's too bad, you have to go and slave away at the in the school, then like this is just it's a horrible exchange. Let
it,
people have that work life balance, that they can come in refreshed, re-energized, ready to take on the challenges that the job provides, rather than just say, no, I demand to, I want to squeeze out every drop of energy and joy from this profession because of reasons. Um,
and every workplace, or every good workplace, relies on goodwill between employees and employer.
yeah,
And it should do. It's this way. Teachers do huge amounts of voluntary work. And whenever they go on strike, they say, "Okay, we're just going to stop doing the things that we do for free, the things that
right.
we're not paid for, the after-school classes, the this, that, and the other."
The football
Which,
teams and the
yeah,
yearbooks and
it's
all
like,
that stuff. Yeah,
these terrible lazy bums who are so hated by such large numbers of the province, who do free work in their spare time for nothing. Anyway, so you rely on that goodwill, but what has happened is that the teachers don't have that goodwill anymore. They're like, well, screw it. I've got on this hand, in this hand, I've got a huge pile of motivations to want to stay home and avoid the hellscape in my classroom. On this hand, I have nothing that's encouraging me to go in. No, I think I'll use that sick day. I mean,
yeah.
it's the yeah. Ultimately, it's the employer's fault when this kind of situation arises. Obviously, you know, it's not to excuse people who abuse the system, but still, you've put the circumstances in place, and now you're dealing with this with
I
what you've
I think the
caused.
I think the abusers are few and far between, and they get caught out by the system. The idea of the justification for, we're going to hire a PI, a private investigator, to come in specially, is, to me, it opens to a big abuse of tax dollars, because you're basically saying there's a major failure in that relationship, that you can justify this to the rest of us who are paying our tax dollars into the public system, that this is justifiable expense. I say, well, where's the failure in this, that we've gotten to this point? Because the idea of, oh, there's somebody who abuses the sick day system. Yeah, every profession has it. You go to any job, you're going to find, everybody knows the one person who, yep, they always take it. They're the ones who are never around when we need them. They're the ones who always take a day off. They know how to game the system to get the most time off, or whatever have you. Um, that's just that always happens. So what, I find this is an overkill solution to, I think, a very commonplace a problem, and ultimately I think it's just going to be a waste of our tax dollars, where it could be going into just change of policy and a
Uh,
re and like a real uh, a real commitment to re-engage properly professional to professional in our schools.
yeah, and this this is so typical of everything that's going on at the moment. And we've got multiple kind of investigations going on into misspending by school trustees. Well, I mean, I have to say, a bunch of school trustees are too many. School trustees are not worth uh, having, to put it as briefly as I possibly can.
That's
But
another way to get.
but everywhere we're spending money to cover up cracks in the system, rather than spending money on the bloody education.
Yeah.
So it, yeah, I mean, it's a. I mean, I when when I was still at school, and I was heading towards an arts degree. It's like, well, what can you do with an arts degree? Well, you can become a teacher. I can remember thinking at the age of 16, it's like, there's no bloody way I ever want to do that job. That looks awful. And I think the UK was frankly 20 years ahead of Canada in terms of what government funding does in a classroom. So I think I'm seeing things now. I saw things then in the 80s that Canadian teachers are just starting to sort of have to deal with now. But um, it it's such an important thing. And one of the things that Canada had going for it was that we did actually have a pretty damn good public education system. And why? Because we pay for it, because we actually did pay teachers a decent amount. But we're just hanging them out to dry now, and it's a tragedy.
Well, so it's something we'll keep an eye on in the coming year, because again, election year probably for 2025, and this I think will be a big. It should be a big topic for the 905 and Ontarians at large. On that note, I'm going to say let's call this first episode of 2025 to a close. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Um, Thanks for being with us all these years, and we will have hopefully a very fun, informative, and exciting 2025 for everyone listening. Thanks very much, everyone. Take care. Bye bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.